my pleasure to introduce our next guest speaker. She has worked in and around schools for 30 plus years and has been recognized for her work in education and equity. Since 2017, she's spoken to over 500,000 students and provided trainings and keynotes. She has 3 TEDx talks and recently published a book, Bridges to Heal Us, Stories and Strategies for Racial Healing. She's also an accomplished athlete because some people just have to be good at every darn thing, right? We are so thrilled to have this person joining us to share her message of hope and action. People, put them together for the one, Erin Jones.
Good evening. It is such an honor to be here with you tonight. And I think especially in this moment, Shalimar, you already kind of initiated the conversation about where we are as a country. And it's days like today that give me hope, looking out at this audience, at other people who really believe in serving the people and making sure that we all have what we need. So who am I outside of having run for office and been an educator? I think when I think about the context of this moment, of the work that Solid Ground does, Amy mentioned in her speech the power of words. I learned last year at 52, on my way to deliver a keynote here in Seattle. I live in Olympia. I was on the road, and my mother, who's mom, but she's my adopted mom, I just call her mom. She is just mom. She's the only mom I've ever known. My mom texted me, and she said, Erin, I just heard you on KUOW doing an interview. Have you rewritten your origin story? I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, you shared on NPR that you were the product of a relationship between a black man and a white woman in 1970 in Minnesota, and because of that, you were given away for adoption. She said, that's not the full story. Now, she's texting me this. So if you know anyone from Minnesota, you know that passive-aggressive, some of y'all know what I'm talking about. That's my mama. I love her. I love her. And she is texting me this as I'm driving to do a 5,000-person keynote here in Seattle. And she says, honey, your mom had an affair. My white mom, who was married to a white man, had an affair with a black man. And of course, in 1970, there was no abortion. And so my mother told me last year, exactly a year ago, you were the product of an affair, honey. Your mother's husband gave her an ultimatum. Either the baby, or me. And she chose him. And she left me in the hospital the day I was born. And I could see myself as a reject, but I don't, because 3 months later in foster care, Bruce and Dorothy Adamson decided to adopt a child that no one wanted. The director at the adoption agency told my parents, nobody wants black babies. And my dad said, it's exactly who we want. And my dad tells the story of walking through the nursery at the Children's Home Society and saying, she's the one we want. I was chosen by a family, not rejected. What we say about people matters. And as I listen to Florine's story and I listen to Lissa's story, there is beauty and brilliance in every single human. How we talk about humans matters. And I think about how I came to be on this stage today. My parents were disowned by their families for adopting me. They're good Christian Minnesota families said, we don't want to have anything to do with you. And so my parents decided in 1976 to take us across an ocean to Europe. And I was raised at the American School of The Hague in the Netherlands. The Netherlands, y'all. They could have chosen Chicago or Atlanta, LA, DC. They chose the Netherlands. And I would end up going to one of the best private schools in the world for free because my dad was a teacher there. And the benefit of that was I got to be around very powerful people. Just for instance, I went to school with the Israeli ambassador's kid and the Palestinian ambassador's kid in the 80s. For those who think like October 7th last year was the first time, I need you to understand what it's like to be in classrooms with kids whose countries are at war. And I got to live through that and think about what does it mean to actually live a life that matters. And I had decided by the time I was in high school, I'm going to become an international lawyer. And what I knew is if I was going to do that, I needed to come back to the United States and go to a really good college. And all the lawyers at the United Nations had gone to Harvard or Princeton or Yale. And so I was terrified to apply to Harvard. So I applied to Princeton. And I remember the day in March of 1989 when they announced over the loudspeaker at my school, "Erin's been accepted at Princeton." And everybody's cheering everywhere. And I got home that night. My teacher dad, who made teacher money, was sitting at the kitchen table, and I could tell he'd been crying. And I'd never seen my father cry before. And he said, "Erin, I need you to come sit down." And what should have been the best day of my life turned into a very different day. As my dad, the math teacher, forever the math teacher, y'all, he's such a math teacher, he wore a pocket protector into the 90s. Some of y'all who are not laughing are not old enough to know what that is. But my dad sat me down at the kitchen table that night and he said, "Honey, you did everything we asked you to do and more." Turns out Princeton had assumed I was a rich kid looking at the name of my high school. They never looked at my financial aid forms. And they gave me a $1,000 scholarship. Understand, I graduated second in my class. I could speak 4 languages fluently. I played 3 varsity sports. I played 2 instruments in the band, and I took 11 AP classes. I was not taking chances. Part of this excellence thing and doing it all was to get to America on a scholarship. And my dad had to tell me that day, "You're not going, honey." And here's what I tell kids all the time. There are going to be times when you do all the right things and it still doesn't work. And you have to have a dream that's big enough that you keep going. I would end up 3 weeks later getting another scholarship. And this one was significant. It was to a place called Bryn Mawr College. It's the sister school to Princeton. Pretty good school. What I knew about Bryn Mawr was that it was in Philadelphia. That's what the packet said. We didn't have YouTube. Some of y'all can't even imagine not having internet, but we did not have YouTube. So all I could trust was the brochure, and there was this really famous guy named Bill Cosby who was from Philadelphia. I know he's a hot mess now, but we did not know this in the 80s. And then there was this brand new show out called The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And I knew he was from Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, born and raised. And I thought, we could do this. And so I got on a plane, sight unseen, and came to America. And I got off that plane in the Philadelphia International Airport and took a taxi cab out on the main line to my college, which was not in the city of Philadelphia. It was in the 7th wealthiest zip code in America. And there was a sign on the main street right next to my college, and it said this: Lower Merion, which is the county, cricket club. No coloreds or Jews allowed here. For those who don't know what colored is, it's black folks. No blacks or Jews allowed here. Imagine being an 18-year-old kid, and that's the first sign you see. On my second week on campus, a woman walked up to me, and without any hate, she said to my face, "You're only here because we have to have 10 of you." And that's how I learned about affirmative action. And I remember a piece of me died that day. It was the first time I thought maybe I didn't earn my spot in America. Now I know it. I'll be 54 next Tuesday. I know at almost 54 years old, I earned my spot at Bryn Mawr. But imagine being an 18-year-old kid being told, remember, our words matter. And a piece of me died that day. And do you know what saved me? What saved me was playing basketball on an outdoor court one day with a guy named Dr. J. If you're not a baller, Dr. J was a baller. He's still a baller. One of the greatest NBA stars to ever play, and I played with him all day on an outdoor court right outside of Philadelphia, and at the end of the game, he went home, and I asked these 3 high school black boys, "Hey, who was that guy we just played basketball with?" And they looked at me like I had 3 heads and green skin, and they said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from the Netherlands." And they didn't say, "Where is that?" They said, "What is that?" And I remember saying to these boys, "How do you not know where the Netherlands are?" And they said, "We stopped going to school a long time ago." And the teacher kid in me asked these kids, where are you going to, you stopped going to school? I don't understand. Don't you have to go to school in America? And they said, nobody's ever checked on us. We don't even know where our parents are. And I said to these boys, what is your dream for the future if you're not going to get a high school diploma? And all three said, we don't expect to live to be 21. Why would we dream about a future? And I knew that day, at 18 years old, almost 19, how I wanted to change the world. And I ran all the way back to my college, and I called my parents. You had to call an operator to call Europe. And I woke my parents up in the middle of the night, and I said to my white parents, I love y'all, and I realized today how much you sacrificed to give me a different opportunity. But I also know what I need to do. And I want to make sure that kids who look like me have the same opportunity that I had. And I'm going to be a teacher. The thing that I vowed, I will never be like my parents. I will never be like my parents. I will never be like my parents. I will be a teacher for kids who look like me. And I began to teach that next fall in North Philadelphia. And I knew by the time I was 19 years old that zip code and race and home language and ability were absolutely the greatest predictors of how children got to experience school. But I also knew by 19 that America likes to wait until people are really failing before they invest. So why am I here tonight? Because solid ground is on the front end of this. Solid ground is looking at the back end and the front end and thinking about what can we do to be that safety net, to be that solid ground so people don't have to get to the place where they have nothing. And I think what that requires is seeing every person, that person on the corner, that person sleeping in their car, being willing to see every single person as valuable. And right now as a country, let's keep it real, we just don't see things that way. Last year, I was getting ready to speak in California, and one of my former students, who was our state teacher of the year in 2020, she called me. And she said, Erin, are you in Olympia? I live in Olympia. Are you in Olympia? Can you come testify today? And I said, what are you testifying on? She said, there's a bill on inclusion, and it would be awesome to have you here. I said, I would love to, but I have to get on a plane. And I get about 30 minutes away from my home towards the airport, and she calls me again, and she's crying, and she said, Erin, there's a bill on the floor right now, or a bill in that House Ed committee on feeding children. Do you know there's a bill last year would have fed all children, and 200 people showed up against that bill. And she was sickened. We have an opportunity to feed children. We have an opportunity to clothe children. We have an opportunity to give people the dignity that I believe all humans deserve in this country. Thank you to all the staff who are transporting people and working on the farm and teaching people to cook and giving them those opportunities to feel like human beings, because every single person around us deserves that value. I had the opportunity when I got married. I met my husband. You all know his brother, Jesse Jones, Cairo News. He's not at Cairo anymore, but I figured if I said that, you would know who I'm talking about. He works for Bob Ferguson now, but that's my brother-in-law. So imagine him times 2, that's my husband. But I married my husband right out of college, and he was going to Notre Dame for grad school. And we got married right away, had our first kid, tried to go buy a home in South Bend, Indiana. And over the phone, what do you think the real estate agent assumed about me? And when 2 large black people showed up, she took a step back, and she said, oh, we don't sell to your kind. And you won't find a real estate agent who will sell to your kind. Florine, I heard you talking about that oppression piece. And I turned to my husband that day and I said, where could we live in America where my white parents and us could live on the same block? And he said, Tacoma, Washington is the only place I know. And that's how we ended up in Tacoma, Washington, 28 years ago. But I say all this to say, we are still not perfect here in this state. And we have so many opportunities. And we can look at all the things we don't have control over right now. But I want to challenge you. I believe the answers are in this room. I believe the resources are in this room. I believe the resources are in your pocketbooks, but I believe the resources are also connected to you and the relationships you have. And for those who don't have resources, you have time that you can devote to volunteering. So I want to encourage, I believe the answers to where we are right now is right here in the room. It's in each of our communities. And so I live in Olympia. I co-own a cultural center where we are doing this very same work down in Olympia. It's my honor to be with you today, but I want to encourage you to give in every way that you can. I believe that our neighbors, even the ones we don't agree with, deserve to be seen with value and dignity. I want to end by reading the last page of my book. I wrote this book in 2020, after I watched how people in my church community responded to George Floyd. I told you my parents didn't really get along with their parents. My grandparents were not super excited about having a Negro baby in the family. The day after George Floyd was murdered, my aunt, who lives in Minneapolis, sent my mother an email, and all it said was, if black people would just follow the law, they wouldn't get killed by police. And my mother called me, and she was livid, and she was so angry, she was almost crying, and she said, Erin, you're so much better with words. What do I say to my sister? And I said, you actually don't say anything. She doesn't deserve your energy. Y'all stop giving your energy to people who don't deserve it. Stop. We only have so much. And then I knew the next day how I wanted to provide something to the world. I knew that I had a story that could heal us, and so I began to write this book, Bridges to Heal Us. And here's my invitation to all of us, to gratitude, courage, and love. Stay grateful for every moment. Stay curious about those around you. Stay learning. Don't be paralyzed by not having the exact right answer now. Keep moving and speaking and disrupting and investing. Keep being and building the bridges we need to heal us. Do you see me on the track? I'm running in front of you, behind you, alongside you, reminding you when your lungs burn to keep going, reminding you to keep your eyes on the prize. Run through the finish line, my friends. You've got this. We've got this. Thank you.